Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the K Nuclear Podcast. Um, so, a little disclaimer for this podcast: I have not done much, and as I told you guys, this podcast is not about statistics, the numbers. Of course, it will. We will include numbers. This podcast is about a wide range of topics, and as you guys know, or as you know, I did an episode on El Salvador, which I thought was interesting. Well, I'm just starting out. So, today we're going to be talking a little bit about Canada. So, Canada is always a nice country. It's a great country with beautiful nature, good people. It's close to the US. It has good ties with the US. I think it's the number one country that the US trades with. Has a good economy, of course, and a very bright future, good working population, although there are some problems, but all in all, it's a very good country. And for immigrants and people who are, looking forward to uh, move somewhere, a nice country, and who wants to be. If you're a person living in a third world country and you have like good education, you're hopefully, well off to afford a ticket to Canada and have the go through the visa, the process, and everything. Canada is one of those countries that are welcoming. Plus, they give you a good opportunity to prosper and have a good life. Also, having welcoming people, Canadian people, always welcoming, and so much more. They have awesome maple syrup. I haven't tried maple syrup. I don't know. Um, But then again, they have Niagara Falls, they have cities like Vancouver, Toronto, and much more. So, in this podcast today, we're not going to be talking about how good Canada is. We're just going to be talking about how Canada is doing uh, some of its stuff. Like, where does Canada gets it wrong? I think Canada is an awesome country, but for today, our discussion is going to be focused on how Canada is doing some of the stuff wrong. So let's go. So if you're gonna start, I mean, like I looked up some of the problems. I watched some videos. There were like great YouTube videos about the dark side of the Canadian economy, the dark side of the socioeconomic problems, and the problems that they have on a geopolitical level, and their inside politics, their market competitiveness, and we're going to be touching a bit on each topic in today's podcast. So let's get started right into it. Number one, we'll have a few points. We'll be talking about a few points in this podcast. We're going to go from socio-economic problems because that's something that you find within the country, and then we are going to go into some geopolitical issues where the country as a whole affects its surrounding and the other countries that it works with. And also, we're going to be talking about economic challenges that the country faces, and so much more. So you see, my conversation is not fully scripted. So I'm going to try my best to give you a little bit of, and if you are a person that's going to, it's planning to go to Canada, I think if you are listening, you can um, look into these problems and check it out if these problems are really bothers you. I mean, do not take my word. I'm not spitting like fucking 100% facts. I'm just saying what I have heard. I've never been to Canada, but I am into, I mean, looking into facts about certain countries, how they work and how their governments work, how they impact other countries, and how their citizens see their government. So let's get started on that. Socioeconomic problems. I think the number one problem that they have right now in Canada, when I look, uh, when I read through stuff, when I watch videos, and this great analytical content that people produce about countries, I think one big thing is housing. The problem of housing affordability, and people having a higher number of homelessness. I think as Canada is not as capitalistic as, let's say, the US, that should help Canada, but Canada is experiencing, I think, a record number of people being homeless, or people not even working, people not being able to afford proper housing. And I think that is a big issue. So, housing costs. So, major cities like Toronto, Vancouver have seen dramatic increases in housing. I don't know the percentages. It should be like 400, 300%, I'm hoping. And rent prices are increasing, and people literally have to wait in long lists and long queues to get a viewing of a housing. Like the people who rent out houses, they have to see your CV, and then they have to go through. It's like applying for a very competitive job opportunity. Finding a home in Vancouver, example, let's say Vancouver, yeah. It's like a fucking competitive job into at a big company that you're trying to get in, and then there's so much people. As a matter of fact, we'll come back to these queues, because there's also another interesting fact about queues in Canada. Uh, some videos I've seen in the internet. So housing, we were talking about housing. So it's really unaffordable and leading for many people to become homeless. Even the Canadians who, I mean, like white Canadians themselves, or the Canadians who have lived there, uh, happens in this sense. Housing, I mean, Canada is a rich country, and it has the government has no problem subsidizing housing and building up new houses. But the problem is when a country gets rich, and the real estate market like skyrockets, and people buy good real estate. They buy good plots of land in expensive places, expensive cities, big cities. The problem is that there is a few people with a 1%, let's say 1% of very rich people, and they come in and they take out all the competition. So there is no room for, say, the middle class. And what happens there is they buy land and they control everything. So it's like a monopoly sort of. And then people just lose hope. They normal people who have normal jobs, people who used to be being able, like, who were able to buy a house 10, 20 years ago with their normal salaries, let's say $100,000 a year annual salary, or less, maybe 90,000, 80,000, which is, the average in the US. But they can't afford a house uh, at this range. So many people go into, setting up tents, and living in their cars, living in mobile homes, and so on. uh, so it's a problem with wealth disparity and the inability of government to come build affordable housing. They can build, but once rich people get their hands on the expensive places, the expensive properties, they don't want someone else coming and building affordable housing in their backyard. So it's a actual term, not in my backyard. It's an actual term where these high class and influential people who buy properties, they don't want uh another housing apartment where poor people live. That's a they consider it like a black mark to their property values. So not in my backyard, that's a term that they use it, I mean, like, use for this process. So they have money, they can influence politicians who support affordable housing can never get elected. Like, let's say I'm a mayor that wants to solve the homelessness crisis, let's say in Vancouver, some district in Vancouver suburb or city. I will never get elected if I support building good housing, affordable housing for the people who can afford some sort of affordable housing. I will never get elected, and even if I come out strong, they will still pressure me. They will still sue me until I give up, or at least I, you know, tell them that no, I'm not going to build affordable housing. So it's that bad. So people vote to people, vote for politicians who will continue to back them up and keep their place as clean as possible. So we are seeing a disparity here. So that's about housing and homelessness, and then we'll go to income inequality. So recently I saw this graph where in the US, so it's the US, uh, like, actually, if you take the US, it's North America, so you can include Canada in it. Canada has a big population of wealthy individuals, millionaires and billionaires. What is happening in North America is the disappearance of middle income, or what do you call it? So I don't know how I forgot that word. The middle class. Middle class used to be the backbone of the American society when it was, booming. That's why we have uh, the boomers, the baby boomers. They were the working class. They were the people who did blue collar jobs, white collar jobs, and they were the people who was getting the economy, getting it started and getting it, like, uh, achieving really high levels of development. They were the ones who went to universities, got jobs, raised families, you know, gave back to the community, raised kids, and everything. So that's the middle class. And when you see that kind of people just dwindling away, and the wealth gap or the socio-economic status of people just drastically moving sideways, where 1% or 10% just owns everything and the rest just goes into deep poverty, and they have no chances of having wage increases or salary increments, but the other side is just getting richer and richer. Recently, I saw a video by Johnny Harris. I think he released this video yesterday. It shows um, how different is a life of a person who earns, let's say, 20,000, 25,000, or 30,000 US dollars a month, and a difference between a person who earns 70, 80,000, 90,000, or let's say up to 1 million. And it completely shows. And then he will show how people who earn above 25 million dollars a month live, and also uh, how cunningly these very, very extremely wealthy individuals pay really less taxes, less of an income tax than the people who earn less. um, it's a vicious cycle. It's like you're poor and then you get more poor, and when you're rich you just get rich, you just get, I mean, it's logical that when you're rich you have more opportunity, you have more loopholes, I mean you have more leeway to spice things up and make a difference. But um, when if you watch that video, uh, it's really fucking sad that it's happening. And I think it's crazy that uh, how drastic these problems can be and can become in this context. So the middle class, the people who are supposed to make children, who are supposed to, be leaders in their communities and have good lives. So the middle class is disappearing. It's a problem with the whole of North America. And it was really bad back in, as the graph showed, it was really bad back in the 80s, the 70s, and it was getting better, the wealth inequality, but we're seeing a rise in wealth inequality within the past 5 years, especially with the pandemic, the oil price, fluctuations with the war on Ukraine and Russia. And so we're seeing many changes in that aspect. So the middle class, I think this is a big topic that we need to talk about. And I think sooner or later there will be an uprising again against the super rich by the middle class, and then not, I mean, like, many countries will try to reestablish a proper middle class. um, so moving on to the next is the healthcare system strain. So I think Canada was doing really better than the US was historically bad at the healthcare system. It was very expensive. The US was very expensive. Canada, on the other hand, is more of a universal type of healthcare system where the government funds the healthcare system. Uh, Canada has been praised globally. I think they sort of did something like the French, the UK's NHS, and the German healthcare system. They took some parts of their systems and then incorporated that into Canada. So Canada is basically like Europe in North America, but also capitalistic, just like uh, just like the US. But the healthcare system had been good, but they're also facing, strains on the healthcare system, like the lack or the shortage of doctors and everything. I mean, I thought about Canada, going to Canada uh, and working there, but uh, I'm one thing that really uh, like disen dis in incentivize or going to work or getting the license in Canada is that they have a very hard exam, just like the USMLE. They have a very hard exam for you to be a licensed practitioner in Canada, and I think that really deters many people who are willing to go and work there. um, and also the lack, Canada is a huge country, and also there's a I think it's natural that if you're a huge country and then there are so many rural areas that you have to have medical coverage, it's a deep situation where, you know, if I'm a doctor, I wouldn't go in a rural area and then try to work there. I'll probably stick to the cities and the popular places, the better places for me to live. So that's a issue many large scale countries face. Even though they're rich, uh, it's very hard to reach out to rural settings to, provide them with good healthcare, good oral healthcare, and also the fact that the population has it's an aging population because Canadians uh, don't. I mean, that's also a problem with the shrinking middle class. You'll have people making less children. Of course, if you're like having problems paying your bills, you don't have many children. It's financially illogical and it's a stress. So they also have indigenous people issues. Canadians are mostly like European descent, but they used to be Eskimos and every Inuits. I don't know, the indigenous populations, the Red Indians, native population. So that's also an issue, but it's not something that I know how to talk about. So let's go to geopolitical issues. What issues does Canada have with other countries? The number one being that they are heavily dependent on the US for the economy. US is the biggest trading partner, and US is the biggest investing partner in their country. And whatever happens to the US, and US is also in a bad state economy wise, all they're really far ahead of other countries. They are not what it used to be. So Canada experienced whatever the US experienced. Their economic crises, changes in stock market. Uh, we have the upcoming elections in the US, and that also heavily impacts Canada. So I guess that's it for today. For today's episode, I don't want to make episodes longer than 30 minutes for now, but that might change. But hopefully, I'll be coming back with the second part. Not hopefully, I will try to make a really good second part of the Canadian, um, you know, what works around Canada and how we can hopefully solve this issue and what steps Canada is taking, and also a few other problems that the Canadian economy faces, the Canadian socio-economic sphere faces, like political issues, and we have like deeper political issues and uprisings. I mean, riots and everything. And so uh, it will be a second deep dive. But for today, I guess that's it. Um, Sorry that I couldn't do my best with this part, but hopefully the next part will be better. As always, I'm saying I'm just starting out, and this podcast, this show is something I'm really into, and I'm trying to leverage the best I can out of this opportunity. So thank you for sticking by, and I hope you enjoyed this podcast. To come up with some awesome ideas, awesome components into my podcast. Also, short form content. I don't know how that will any use full for me, but I think in this day and age, I think short form content is always important to promote your work. But let's see. All that's going to be it for now. To see you again soon in the next one. Have a nice day. I wish you all love and strength. There, Priya.